I started looking around and I ended up getting initiated into Transcendental Meditation, into TM. Mm-hmm. And so I did the initiation. I got connected to this woman in Beverly Hills who had initiated like Madonna and Lenny Kravitz. It was totally an LA thing, right? You know, she initiated all these fancy people. And she gives me the mantra. I go back to my place. I sit down. I close my eyes. I hit the mantra. And I was like, boom. Everything goes silent. I go straight down to the bottom of the well. There's this immense stillness. And I just sit there and the mantra's sitting right in the third eye and I'm just spinning it. And I can feel just the energy pouring down on me. And so that's sort of, I was like, oh, I've been looking in all the wrong places. That thing I've been looking for, it's not out there and all that stuff. It's right in here.
Shit's about to go down. I'm feeling something in my spirit.
Chats and Tatts with Aaron Della Vedova.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to Chats and Tatts with me, your host, Aaron Della Vedova. A lot of you who know me probably also know that I have a pretty extensive journey in philosophy, and I guess some people would call me a seeker. I've read a lot of spiritual books. Most of my the stuff I lean on, I guess you would consider Eastern, Buddhist, Taoist. But I've also experimented with a lot of different types of meditation throughout my life. Experimented with a number of different plant medicines, and it's just something I find to be very, very important. It's something I can't seem to turn off as much as I try to turn away from it. It always finds its way to creep back into my life. And so, I don't know, at some point I just said, screw it. This is what I like to do. So I keep trying to meet people and have conversations that are deep and meaningful, especially with folks that are very involved with, spiritual paths and seeking spiritual knowledge. And in that journey, I've met quite a few remarkable people. One of those folks is here with me today. He is a lot of things. I mean, he's a very successful businessman. He's a father. He's a husband. But I think for me, one of the most profound things I know about him is his path of spirituality. It's more extreme than anyone I've ever met in my 51 years. And when I say extreme, I just mean maybe a better word would be committed. So this is a person that I've grown a deep connection to. We have done some meditation seminars together. I've extensively tattooed him. And through all these different experiences, we've become very, very, very good friends. And I just thought it was appropriate to share him with you guys. So with all that being said, and without further ado, please welcome my guest today, Ian Gardner. Hey, Aaron, thanks for man. I'm glad you're here. It's been a long time. It has. Too long. 5 years, maybe? At least. I mean, you're only an hour away.
I know, it's embarrassing.
I blame it on you.
It's usually my fault. Alex does that too, and that's usually makes things peaceful. So go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. You'll take it. That's a smart man. Well, no, it's just life is busy, and I don't know. It's funny when you know someone is there and you have access to them. I know for me, I tend to just not maybe give them the time they need. It's when you find out like, oh, my friend, they're moving, and suddenly you're having over to the house for dinner. It's like, why didn't I do that before he was moving? Why do I only show up at why I don't want to just be at the person's funeral. Like, suddenly we should all make more time for each other. But life is busy and we're all hyper connected. I've never had so many friends, my close inner circle, probably pretty small, but my extended circle, like the rest of us, really is big. Hundreds and hundreds of people. And I actually do care and like so many of those folks, but with the touch of a button, they can text you and they can call you. And suddenly you wake up in the morning and it's like, there's just a lot of communication that happens in my world. I'm sure in yours too. But separate subject. We went on and off on that one on the last episode, how to manage time and how to manage all of this connectivity that we're involved in nowadays, good or bad. But let me switch it back to how I introduced you. Back when we met, I might get some of these details a little bit wrong because it was probably 15 years ago. I grew up Catholic, saw a lot of hypocrisy in the Catholic religion, obviously. I mean, not obviously, but I think we've all heard some of the things that happen. But you can't judge a religion by the folks that are in it. But I was a young man. I just thought, fuck this. These people are hypocrites. I've got these guys, they go to church on the weekend, they get drunk, on Sunday after church, and I'm like, this doesn't feel right. So I just said, I kind of went anarchist, really. For me, it was just fuck everything, go punk rock, burn it all down. And then I carried that through high school. And then I got out of high school and joined the military and realized the anarchy thing wasn't really working. Like there were ways to involve myself in life that were more productive. And then I started the seeking path. And for me, it was Buddhism. I just found some books on Buddhism and I was like, holy shit, these guys,
something else out there.
Yeah, it made sense to me. Like just the simple laws of karma. And now reincarnation, I don't know. I don't have memories of past lives, separate stuff, just the basic laws of karma. And also the biggest thing for me going to, Catholicism to Eastern religion was they allowed you direct access to God, right? I felt like, and it probably is true that, I guess you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Christian religions kind of put a barrier there, a gatekeeper, I would call it. It's
The new version does, yeah.
The new version, right. We're not talking about agnostic or, Dead Sea Scrolls and all that, because I'm
the Hermetics went direct, but the modern monks don't.
Which was a form of control to some degree.
Sure.
And then, but I didn't know that at the time. I just thought all Christianity they were just trying to create it for profits and control. That's why they got a gatekeeper. I'm the priest. You're the person in church. If you do what I say, you might get into the club. And I didn't like that, where the Buddhists came along and said, no. You don't need anybody. You could be all alone and connect to God. It's inside you. And some way to put it might be you are God, which you never said that around a Christian. You are God, you blasphemous son of a bitch. But that was those are the two very wildly different ways to look at spirituality. I don't think what I'm talking about right now is so crazy now that Buddhism and so many different spiritual paths are very in the now and everyone's trying them out and talking about it. So maybe not so crazy to say now. But the point is, I got into reading these books and I really became a spiritual seeker, not even knowing it at the time. And then at some point, I had an experience on dimethyltryptamine in which I ended up, I had already been meditating, but I never left my body. I never entered another realm. I mean, I had brief moments where I thought I was maybe feeling a presence or, subtleties were occurring, but nothing like my DMT experience in which I was thrust out of my body. I was an orb of light with 360-degree vision. I was thrust into an actual reality. It was a temple, giant, almost like a St. Petersburg type temple, but it was made of light and vibration. And there were entities in there made of pure white light, not angels, just they were humanoid in shape, but they were just made of light. They didn't have eyeballs. It was and they were walking around like they were doing their daily business. And some of them knew me and spoke to me. And that whole thing just shattered everything for me. And I remember telling you about it, and you kind of very calmly said, "Oh yeah, what do you think where do you think I'm doing with all my meditation? That these do exist, Aaron.
Totally normal.
Totally normal." And I've never seen anyone say that before. I was like, "What?" You're like, "Oh yeah, you can learn to do, you can access this place exists. It's a matter of meditation and training to learn how to access these places. And you should come do a meditation seminar with me." I met this man, George Boyd, right? Last name Boyd. And we'll get into, I'm going to let you talk a lot here in a second. But at the time, you had been flying around the world seeking out various monks and gurus and swamis and for the Finding Silence project. And I'll let you explain more about what that is for you. But I'm thinking, man, this guy's got some experience. He's flown all over the planet, meeting people that you have to hike into a mountain, that don't even take, visitors. And you had told me, Aaron, I'm telling you, as a man who's done that, this man, George Boyd, is the real deal. He's a actual enlightened soul, ascended soul, came here with only one purpose: to spread spiritual awakening to others. That's, some of us come here learning. He's not here to learn. He's here to teach. He's the real deal. And I was like, no shit. Well, if anyone's going to tell me that, I would probably tell most people they're full of shit. But from you, it meant a lot. And so I did that course.
A lot of people do say that.
Well, it's, you got to understand, for the common dude who just goes to work every week and you're telling them things like that, they're like, huh. But I'll tell you, I might have thought that too if I hadn't seen what I saw on DMT, because to me, I had to see it, this other dimension. And I do believe it truly exists. My access to that without plant medicine isn't there. And it's probably because I haven't taken the time like you have to really work at it. It's like anything, right? You got to work at it. You want big muscles, like you got to go to the gym.
That's right.
Exactly. Look at this. We're syncing up. But that's my story. And that's how we got involved at a deeper level with meditation and spiritual discussions. And you've, of course, shared your books with me. And we'll get into some of the books you've written and some of the manuscripts you shared with me. Very exciting stuff. But having said all that, why don't you take us through that journey? I mean, we don't have to go from birth, but the point in your life where I know you were going through some troubling times, which led you to becoming a spiritual seeker. And then once you did that, the different steps in that journey that have brought you to where you are today.
Sure. That's a big layup. So
It is a big layup. And we'll dice around in there.
Take a little bit of time. So I wasn't really inspired by much when I was in my teens or even in college. My dad was kind of a hard ass. Most of my teens was spent trying to avoid his wrath. Went to school to be a doctor, ended up not going down that path and doing some other stuff instead, but was pre-med, got out, got my first job. And my old college roommate gave me this book called The Way of the Spiritual Warrior by Dan Millman. And he's like, here, you might like this. Just kind of casually handed it to me. And I read that, and that just turned on a whole bunch of lights for me because we had been raised Methodist, and my parents would dutifully take me to church every Sunday, and my dad would teach Sunday school, and we'd do the plays, and I was the little drummer boy and the whole kit. But we didn't really talk about what it actually meant. It was like a social custom that you did because you were part of the fabric of the community, and that's just what you went and did. And for the first time, Dan talks about this other world in such a real live way that really affected me really deeply. And in my 20s were a bit of a real rocky ride for me. I was sort of manic depressive, and I'd get on these big highs and do all this work. And then some nights I'd come home from my job and I'd pour a scotch and turn off the lights and listen to Wagner and just kind of sit into the deep of it. And so I was searching for this purpose and this meaning and this happiness, but a happiness that wasn't ephemeral, a happiness that if I got the promotion or if I got the hot chick or if I got the motorcycle or the car or the clothes or the apartment or the corner office, all those things provided a lift, but they always dissipated very quickly thereafter. And in the back of my mind or spirit or soul, whatever, I was like, there has to be something, there has to be a place or a way of being that where happiness endures and is unshakable. And so I chased all these things in the outside world that I thought would make me happy. And I was a millionaire by the time I was 30, and I had a fancy car, and I had the house, and I had the girl that was the model, and like all the things that, if you grow up on MTV and they didn't have Instagram or any of that back then, but all the shiny magazines, you're like, ooh, that'll make me happy. Ooh, that'll make me happy. And they did make me happy for a few minutes, but ultimately they didn't. And so when I was 27, I felt called to take my life in a different direction, but I didn't really know what that meant. And so I decided to go to business school because I was in the professional world, and that's sort of a professionally acceptable way to take a few years off. And so I went to UCLA, I did my master's degree. And when I was there, I was like, I got this inner nudge. I was like, I got to learn how to do yoga. And I'd grown up in New York and in the South, going to the gym, and yoga was like the furthest thing from any of my reality. And so I went through a friend of mine, I went to a Bikram yoga class in Beverly Hills, back when Bikram was still teaching. And it was this studio on the second floor above a furniture shop on Wilshire. And it had these ugly salmon carpets with these white lines you go stand on. And it was about 110 degrees. And he was up there in his little bikini, all oiled up with his hair up in a bun. And I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? This is like as far from Charlotte, North Carolina as you can get. In the first class, I almost passed out. Like I drank like 2 gallons of water and a sweat pouring down me. My legs, my whole body was shaking. But when I got out of that, I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for. And so I did it, and I got deep into it. I was doing 2-a-day classes, 5 or 6 days a week. I was vegan. I lost 30 pounds. I was down to 160 pounds. In retrospect, what I realized was happening is I was breaking my body down all the way down to its essential elements so that I could be open and build it back up. Mm-hmm. And so on the back of that, after I had gone through some of that, then the nudge was like, okay, you gotta learn how to meditate. And so I started looking around, and I ended up getting initiated into Transcendental Meditation, into TM. Mm-hmm. And so I did the initiation. I got connected to this woman in Beverly Hills who had initiated like Madonna and Lenny Kravitz. It was totally an LA thing, right? She'd initiated all these fancy people. And she gives me the mantra. I go back to my place. I sit down. I close my eyes. I hit the mantra. And I was like, boom. Everything goes silent. I go straight down to the bottom of the well. There's this immense stillness. And I just sit there, and the mantra's sitting right in the third eye, and I'm just spinning it. and I can feel just the energy pouring down on me. And so that's sort of, I was like, oh, I've been looking in all the wrong places. That thing I've been looking for, it's not out there and all that stuff. It's right in here. I was like, okay, shit, now I got it. So I'm going down that rabbit hole. And I was like, how far can this go? How far does this path go? And so I did TM. I read Yogananda's book, Autobiography of Yogi. You got on the shelf. It's like classic in the Pantheon, Babaji, the whole kit. And so I went to the SRF temple and I started getting the Kriyas. I started doing the Kriyas at home. And I just started in my sort of professional life, business school and all that, kind of started to fade into the background a little bit. And so I spent those 2 years riding my motorcycle up to Big Sur and reading and meditating and writing. And at the end of that, I viewed the world in a completely different way. So I moved to San Diego, and through some friends there, I got connected to Deepak Chopra's crowd and Ken Wilber's crowd, and started spending a bunch of time in that circle. And so I had read about this festival in India called the Kumela. And the Kumela is where all the Hindus gather every 12 years at one of these 3 holy sites. And the sadhus come out of the caves. The sadhus is the Indian term for a monk, wandering monk. Usually they're covered in ash and either naked or in a loincloth. And they come down out of the jungles and out of the caves and out of the mountains, and they gather at one of these 3 holy places for a 30-day festival. And I heard about that and I was like, oh shit, I got to get there. Like, I'm going to go find Babaji, straight out of Autobiography of a Yogi. And so I was living in La Jolla at the time. I quit my job. I sold all my shit. I put a few things in storage. And I found a guy from Beverly Hills who was a monk who was a sadhu in India. And I got myself an invitation. Didn't know a soul. And flew to India to the Kumela. And when I got there, I found out this wasn't just the Kumela. This was the Maha Kumela. So the Kumela is every 12 years. This was the 12th cycle of the every 12 years. So this was every 144 years. It wasn't going to happen again in our lifetime.
Wow.
And so I go there and I'm part of his camp, and I would go down in the morning at 4 a.m. with all these naked sadhus covered in ash for initiation with the elephants and the tridents, and we'd go down and you'd bathe in the Ganga and there'd be dead bodies floating by, and then you'd come back and they'd be smoking chillum and marijuana, and they'd be chanting and giving discourse and everything else. And so I went looking for Babaji because I was going to go be a monk and not come back. I was like, I'm done. This is it. And I didn't find him. He didn't show up for me. It wasn't my path in this lifetime. It was an echo of past lifetimes, a remembrance that I needed to recapitulate. So I came back to San Diego, I started working again, and I heard about this guy who was a breatharian who taught and lived up in the redwoods outside of San Jose at a place called the Heart Math Center. The guy's name is Doc Childer. And through that sort of community I was part of, they would go up and sit, and he does something called camp, where you go up and you sit in the redwoods in an old barn, and you just sit there and you talk about metaphysical shit till 3, 4, 5, 6 in the morning. And he used to be a breatharian, so no food, just living on water and prana. He had managed to learn the practices to do that. And he was fully illumined and completely, he and George are the only 2 people I've ever met that are completely in integrity all the time and never vary. And when I was hanging out with the Deepak crowd, like in the Ken Wilber crowd, I met and where I worked at Esalen for a couple of years in Big Sur, and I met a bunch of the folks who were sort of luminaries in these fields. And as soon as the mic was off, a lot of these people become totally different, completely different than what you see in the books or on the shows or during the seminars. And these 2 guys, Doc and George, were always completely in integrity, in alignment. And I'd never experienced that before. So I started sitting with Doc, and we had a bunch of us. We'd go up there, and through that, I met a guy who was.
Can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
A breatharian.
It sounds fantastic.
Well, I mean, I didn't even know what it was, so you just explained it. So it's somebody that just drinks water and doesn't eat food. And
well, there's
on prana, meaning the energy that the universe is made of.
Yeah, the practice involves taking the energy from the sun and transmuting it into energy that can sustain the body. But you have to drink water, because otherwise you get dehydrated and you die, but you don't eat any food. And it's a gradual, like you start with like vegetarian, and then you There's a progression towards it. There's a physical progression where you gradually wean your body off of solid foods just to water, but there's also and more importantly, there's a spiritual progression where you learn how to, and he would go walking in the tobacco fields in North Carolina and absorb the sunlight, but you have to learn how to take that energy and transmute it into the etheric body in a way that you can sustain your physical form. And so if you don't have someone to teach you the esoteric aspect of it, you can't do it just on the physical aspect of it.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So
But people do it. This guy did it.
People do it, and they do it. There's people that do it in different parts of the world today, but it's a very specific spiritual practice that has a physical manifestation of that practice.
Sorry, I got you off track. Continue.
So I met somebody who was studying on this path called Ekankar, which is a path that a guy named Paul Twitchell reopened in the 50s. And it's based on the spiritual technique is called soul travel. And so you do the spiritual practices, and what it does is you teaches you you go close your eyes, you go into meditation, you focus on the third eye, and you project your awareness up out of your body and into these different spiritual planes where the reality that you experienced on DMT exists as normal and functional as this plane of the physical reality is, except it's just at a higher vibrational level. And so by utilizing the techniques, the spiritual tools in this path, you can learn to go within and shift your attention to different planes. There's 10 different planes of awareness where we have a soul and a body and a complete existence on each of those planes. But in our normal waking awareness, because we are shut down generally, it takes a drug like DMT or a spiritual meditation practice to access those. We're just not aware of what's going on. It shows up as like intuitions or hunches or my gut says this or my heart says this or something like that. That's the trickle
Or
of
dreams
that.
is
Dreams.
Is that what's happening when we dream, you think? Or are we kind of floating it around these different dimensions?
Well, there's different types of dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Some are just the body, the soul leaving the body or the attention leaving the body and going up in the astral and having fantastic. That's where the world of creativity is. So like as the great artists in history have a conscious connection to the astral where they bring that information down and they manifest it in the physical.
Okay.
And so you can dream and go there, but you can also have spiritual dreams where you go and study at these temples of learning on different planes of reality. There's going to be lots of different experiences with it. And so for me, this was a practice that immediately resonated for me. And so I spent 3 years just going completely down the rabbit hole on that path. I read every book written by every student. I went to all the seminars. I did all the workshops. It felt like I was plugged into an electrical socket because there was so much spiritual power coming through my body. Some days I would get up and I couldn't even barely tie my shoes because it was just like zzz. And so when a lot of my friends would go out, they'd be partying and, doing all this crazy stuff on Friday and Saturday night. I'd be at home reading spiritual books and meditating and watching these worlds open and unfold in front of me and just trying to not have my head explode and figure out what's going on. And so it was so intense. I ended up getting a job just managing a cafe on the beach in Pacific Beach during the day, because I just couldn't do much more than that. And so I would go and I would manage the breakfast shift and the lunch shift. And I'd come home and I would meditate for 6 or 8 hours a day. And what I would do is I would go into the spiritual realms and I would connect and find these teachers of different traditions. And I would ask them questions and they would give me answers. And I learned to do it while I was conscious, and I would take dictation. And so I would go talk to Jesus and the 12 disciples, and I would talk to Merlin and King Arthur, and I would talk to Muhammad, and I would talk to the Buddha and these big spiritual luminaries, and I would just do a Q&A with them. And so I ended up writing 5 books about my journey in those worlds. I had a 5-book deal with Deepak Chopra's publisher. The first one came out, did pretty well, and it was about Jesus and the 12 disciples, and churches started to build study groups around these books, and people started having miraculous experiences. And I wasn't involved. I was writing and meditating, but my publisher would come to me and like show me these testimonials of people who had had these experiences reading the book. Because when you write a physical book, I'm just the conduit, but the energy of the book is anchored on the place in the spiritual worlds where that knowledge or truth originates, and it would come through me into the paper. And so when you read the word on the paper and focus on it and merge with it, you actually are connecting to that place in the inner worlds. And that energy from that place is coming through those words and into you. And people were having all these
like spontaneous awakenings and things like this.
Healing, like all kinds of just crazy experiences. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of like, I was in the cave mostly because my publisher was sheltering me because I was continuing to write. And I was working, and a bunch of my books that I wrote were about my journeys on the Ekankar path with the group of the masters on that path. They're called the Order of the Vairagi. Vairagi in Sanskrit means detached, means detachment from worldly concerns. And so I started writing about my experiences with them. There was a guy within that tradition who was sort of guiding me because I was like, I didn't know what the hell was going on. I was having all these crazy experiences. I had no context to them whatsoever, except for some of the books, like Yogananda's book that I'd read. And so he was kind of mentoring me and helping me like make sense of this craziness. And so I started to write these books about my experiences, and they started to get into the Ekankar community, and the leadership found out, and they contacted me and they said, you can't do that. You've only been doing this work for 3 years, and you can't talk about that stuff and write about that stuff. And I was like, I mean, it's happening to me. Like, what do you mean? I thought this was a path of love where we're like, and so eventually it got to the point where they're like, no, you can't. And I'm like, it's just happening. It's my truth. I have to be in integrity with my truth. And so they excommunicated me. They sent me the blue letter, and they said, you're not allowed to affiliate or talk or write or anything else. I got kicked out. And then the guy that had been sort of helping me through this started an offshoot of Ekankar, a new path called the Way of Truth Eternal that was based on my books and my writings. And so then it got really weird, and the African community really attached to the works because they found a lot of value in them and were having experiences with them. But people would start coming up to me, and they were asking for past life readings and healings and and all this stuff. And like, they'd come up and they'd touch your feet, and it got super weird to me. And
well, yeah, suddenly you're like some kind of idol that you didn't expect that to come your way. That wasn't your intention.
No, none at all.
And suddenly it's happening, and you're like, whoa.
Yeah. And the guy that I was working with was really into it. He wanted to be a teacher. So I gave him all my books. I assigned the copyrights to him, and I wrote the Bible for this path and the sacraments and the study lessons and the whole kit. I gave it all to him. And I said, go do it. And I said, I'm going back to the cave. Mm. And so I went to these inner teachers that I was working with, and I said, I want to go be a monk. And they said, no, not this time. The world doesn't need more monks. It's got plenty of those. That's the old model. What your job is to take all this stuff, all this knowledge from these inner planes in the sky, and bring it to the street where people need it. And I was like, come on, like that monk thing sounds really good. Like, are you sure? They're like, yeah. And they said, these are the things you need to go and learn more about. And they gave me a very specific list of esoteric topics. They said, there's 2 teachers on the planet who can teach you this. Go find one and start doing it. And at this point, I was living in PB. I had a 1987 Land Cruiser with 250,000 miles. And that was really it. Like nothing else besides my student loan debt. And so I went and I started searching. After some search, I found this guy named George Boyd, who was living in Venice, who had opened a new path called the Bridge Path. He talked about these topics on his website. And so I emailed him. I sent him a couple of the books. I said, this is what's going on for me. Like, am I crazy? And he wrote me back. He's like, no, here's what's happening for you. Come on, I'll help you out. And so that was like 13 or 14 years ago. And so he has opened a new path that's similar to other paths, Buddhism or Islam or Christianity or Jainism or, whatever. And what he has built by opening this new path is he has created a map, and in his model, consciousness exists on a continuum. So we're here in our physical waking state of awareness in the physical world. And at the very highest is a place called Satchidananda. Everything that's in between, you can think about as a string with pearls on it. And each pearl, he calls it a nodal point, embedded in each nodal point is a different state of awareness. And as you unfold your consciousness, as you bring down the light, burn karma, and allow yourself to access those higher places, you can focus on each pearl and successively go through each one, and the entirety of human experience will unfold before you. Everything that is possible within a physical form. I was like, you're shitting me. That's a bunch of horse shit. And I didn't believe him for years. For probably 6 or 7 years, I thought he was full shit. But something in the back of my head was like, you've looked at a lot of other stuff. Because I'd gone to Myanmar and I'd sat with the Theravada Buddhists in the monasteries there for months. I had gone to Siberia and I sat with the Russian Orthodox monks. I found a monk who was way up high in the mountains who you could only get to by 7 days on a horse at the base of this mountain. He was a Hermetic Christian. I sat with the Buddhists from Mongolia who would come into Russia and build monasteries. I went to a monastery where they had a Buddhist monk who had seen the rise of Stalinism coming and had dug a hole in the ground, built a box, gotten into the box, went into samadhi, and had given his disciples the instructions to unearth him and bring him back on a specific date. And I went to his monastery, and they had unearthed him a few years before, and there he was in a glass box, full lotus, kind of desiccated and leathery looking. And on this day, I just happened to show up on the day when they allowed people to come in, and you could go in, and I sat from me to you, and I sat there and I went into meditation, and I could see that guy alive inside that body in the spirit who had been buried underground for 40 years. And so I'm like, there's some, like this physical world is like, just like nothing compared to the reality of what exists. And so George's path is completely experiential. He doesn't ask you to take anything on faith. He says, if you do this, you will eventually have this, you'll come to this place. And when you have this experience, it'll look like this. And you can go and do it yourself. And so I would do it. I'd go there and I go, and then I would unpack the point and it would be what he described. And I was like, wow, like, I don't have to trust somebody. There's no intercessionary. There's no clergy that says, no, I'll do it for you. It's you going point by point. And so the only limit on how you can unfold is your willingness to expend effort. And so I spent my 30s basically working and meditating. And so, and along the way, I got married, I had a baby, I got divorced, I was a single dad for 10 years. Recently, I got remarried, had another baby, so I got a 14-year-old girl and I got a 18-month-old son. I started a couple companies, sold one, took one public, have done business all over the world. And so now I've sort of, at the end of this 25-year journey, and along the way, people always go, you need to teach, you need to teach, you need to teach. And I'd look at all these, spiritual teacher influencers, doing ayahuasca. And in LA, there's a shaman on every, you can like go online and get your shaman training and, oh, now I'm a shaman. Let's go do ayahuasca together. It's like, okay, come on. Like, but I never wanted to go do that because I felt like I was not complete. And it didn't feel like to me that would be being in integrity to go to someone and say, here's my knowledge. It may help you, when I didn't feel like I'd made it as far as I thought was required. And so now I've been doing this for 25 years. And I have realized over that time, I've sort of surveyed almost everything that's out there. I've completed the majority of George's work. And so it feels like now, and my professional career is, I've worked with the most powerful and, successful people in my field's electric vehicles and clean technology in my field. And so the next step is like, how do I take that journey into inner silence? Because all the answers that I had hoped were out here, I had found in here. And I see people in society, people I work with professionally, or my children, or people in the community, all scrabbling and striving, like like mice in a maze chasing after that little piece of cheese. And it's like, that's not where it's at. It's here. But it's not like, oh yeah, it's here. Ooh, let's close my eyes. It's like, there's a way to get there. The next part of my journey, I think, is trying to be of service and help people to find that.
That is exactly what I was hoping you would deliver. And I know most of that. There's some highlights in there that are new to me, or maybe I forgot a couple of them, but that's exactly it. That's why I wanted to have you on today, because the idea that you can practice meditation to the point where you leave this reality and meet with others and learn from those teachers that are in these other dimensions, I think for most people it sounds crazy. Like, no way, but, and I would have maybe said the same thing until my DMT experience. And of course, I think you would agree that was just a flash, I don't know, whatever that drug.
It's a taste.
It's a taste. And it changed. I don't know what it does to make that happen, but it did. And it was so incredibly real. To this day, I can see it and feel it. And that's what made me think, well, I do think there are other dimensions, and I just popped into one. And so then what the things you were saying, I was listening, and I'm still listening. And I guess I have my own levels of regret with some of the choices I've made up until this point in my life. Like, I'm very proud of my career. I'm very proud of the things I've created with my art, and my family, and my beautiful kids, and my wife, and my businesses, and all the great folks I've pulled together. And there's so much. I don't want to say that I'm not happy with my life, but I'm not done yet, but I didn't lean in as hard to this as you have. And perhaps I will. Maybe that's my next chapter.
But you've been my inspiration, right? Because, I mean, I'm nobody special. Like, the only difference between me and anybody else is just where I put my attention and how much effort I put in. There's nothing unique about me that I did that what somebody else can't do. But you have tattooed, you're the guru tattoo, right? The reason I came to you to start getting inked, because I was super nervous and scared about it. And I was like, the guy's shop is called Guru. He's a grown up. He's got a wife and kids. But you turned on all your artists to consciousness, and you got them all doing that work.
But definitely quite a few who've come and hung out with me enough. They're reading books they probably wouldn't have read, and
you spread that to all your clients. And so you've had a much bigger impact than I have, because I've been stuck in the cave, and you've been actually out here doing it. Yeah.
Well, you're not done. I think this next move you're about to make is going to be the big one. But thank you for the compliment, and perhaps, maybe that's destiny. I don't know if that's the right word. Perhaps I'm right where I need to be. But I don't know. I know I could, and I still may put more time into this. I would love to be able to get to these levels of consciousness without ayahuasca or DMT or these other, plant medicines. And, on that note, a lot of people who are going to be listening to this show, I think this is pretty extreme. I mean, I think you represent kind of the furthest edge of where people can take meditation, at least and I've done my own fair share of talking to people that meditate. They're very serious. And I've met a few, what you might call gurus in my life. And I don't know anyone who's put the amount of time that you've put into this. And I know they're out there. I just haven't met them. And I think, having said that, most of the people listening to the show are probably in that same boat, And, there's this spiritual awakening, revolution, something happening in culture right now with ayahuasca, Burning Man. And suddenly people are talking about taking macro doses of mushrooms under a full moon with clear intention. And I mean, none of this was even happening 20 years ago. If you ate mushrooms, it was to party and see weird shit. People don't talk about them like that anymore. And like you said, and a lot of it, and of course, whenever an expansion like that happens, you get a lot of charlatans and a lot of bullshit. But let's take the charlatans and bullshitters out of there. I mean, I think is truth in these plant medicines. And I know that your heart drove you towards doing it, I guess we could call it the old fashioned way, like meditating, putting the time in, really focusing your attention inwardly, practicing the art of finding stillness. These things are not, to accomplish that it takes time. It's time. Even my short journey in meditation, like on the stents where I would go 6 months, not even daily, like 4 days a week, as the months would go on, I could suddenly be alone in silence for longer and longer periods of time. And I think to get places like you've gone, it's going to take years, like you've told the story, years and years and years. However, in culture today, I don't know how to put it. We're all on phones. It's a very busy world out there. And I do wonder when these plant medicines seem to just drop onto the scene. I mean, I've had people tell me from the ayahuasca community that know real shamans that Mother Ayahuasca sent a simultaneous, because they take the ayahuasca with their participants.
Yep.
And so they're all down there in South America. This is like 15, 18 years ago. And they simultaneously start getting her saying, take this to the West. And that phenomenon did occur. So I kind of wondered about that, your opinion of that, how it does seem to be something that might serve the West in their short attention span type thing, to just inject them with, at least it opens a doorway. Because I don't know. And that's the other thing I will, before you speak on this, is I first thought it was like maybe the solution. Like, oh, ayahuasca and DMT are showing up in the West. We've got powerful CEOs of companies, politicians are doing these things. This is going to be it, man. Give it a couple years. Whole world's going to change. Utopia's on the way, boys and girls. Let's go. And it didn't happen that way. And when I look at my friends that have gone deeply down some of those, have done, ayahuasca 40, 50 times, I've yet to meet anyone who I think it's brought them, I don't know, pure enlightenment or any of that. It just seems to me now, looking back on it, like it seems to just open a doorway. And then once the door's open, the work you've done seems to be the next step. The returning to it is just redundant. And that's just where the opinion I have of it after being around it and in the community of people that are using those types of things for this long. I'm not saying it'll hurt you. I don't think it does. I don't really know many people who've been hurt by it. But is it going to get you to the place you're describing? I don't believe it does. But having said my little speech, what is your take on that? This plant medicine awakening in the West?
I mean, the medicine has been part of human culture since the beginning, right? But these and plants have consciousness too. This consciousness is sort of, it's our remembrance, right? It's our gateway. And so as the Western mind has matured and the mental body has fully matured, then we're ready to continue our spiritual evolution to where now we're in a physical level of consciousness. The next step would be the astral level of consciousness. And so we would, as a collective consciousness, raise our vibration until we don't have physical bodies anymore. And we exist on that astral plane, which is where we go in our dreams. And that's where ayahuasca and all these plant medicines take us. And so they are catalysts, they're gateways, they're keys of remembrance. And so they're really designed to enable us in our physical consciousness to be reminded that there is, and to taste what is out there, as to motivate us to look within and to do that inner work. And the problem is, I don't know if it's a problem, but people can get caught in this loop where like, oh, that's it. And so you 50, 60, 70, 80 times versus using it selectively as a therapeutic to untangle a specifically knotty issue you're dealing with, or as a motivator for the other work. But when I was running my first electric vehicle company, I took my executive team out into the desert in New Mexico, and we sat with a shaman and we all did ayahuasca together as the whole C-suite from this EV company. And it was a powerful and transformative experience. But the medicine is asking to be brought to where it is needed and where the world is in need of healing and is ready for it. And if you think about all of the different cultures and states and governments on the planet, the one that is the most violent and warlike is ours. This is where we make the most weapons, we kill the most people, we incarcerate the most people. We are the most broken culture in America. I love being in America. I'm a patriot. I love California. I love America, freedom, independence, democracy. But beneath that, the shadow side of that is this violence. And so the medicine is finding its way to where it is needed to help with the healing. And California is a high vibration place. It usually starts here. Sometimes it starts on the East Coast, up in the Northeast, but then what happens here spreads out to other parts of the country. And so this generation now that is going to experience plant medicine and having these experiences with other worlds and this healing, as they grow and continue in their journey, they will gather more power in the systems of government and commerce that run our society. And that consciousness that they are learning to embody, those frequencies like tuning forks will start to resonate outward and begin to help heal. And so there's a lot of talk about cultural misappropriation and this is the shamans and you shouldn't be stealing it. And there is an element you do need to give credit where credit is due, but the medicine is asking to be brought here to where it is needed. And so it is an awakening in combination with yoga and meditation and everything. It's all linked to this rising vibration to help us heal and move to a higher place.
I agree. That's exactly not only how I feel about it, but also just anecdotally, I've seen it happen. I've seen that happen with individual friends that, I guess for lack of a better word, were warlike, much like United States in 1950s, I mean, perfectly acceptable to come on home, and if dinner was late, might need to give the old lady a good slap across the face. The neighbor wouldn't even judge you for it, like, yeah, well, she should learn to make dinner on time. That's how fucked up.
Or how our dads disciplined us.
Or how my dad was he's stern, but he from that gen, he was pretty kind. But yes, many fathers, we can go down that. Point is, that's only from 50s till now. And so there's an incredible amount of change there towards empathy, compassion, and cooperation and things, and that's why when people say the world's so fucked up, I kind of always refer to that tiny chunk of time, like, man, just the 50s, it's so close. Like, you could scream out, blasphemy at people that weren't your race and probably be high-fived by the dude next to you. You did that today, the whole room would just stop and be like, what the F did that guy just say? Probably be kicked, So we've made tremendous progress. And I do think the needle's going in the right direction. And I agree with you that, and again, back to my individual friends, I've had guys that have worked with me here who kind of were of that vibration. And then through plant medicine, not through deep levels of meditation, they're not that way anymore. Now, whether or not they'll continue that path in their lifetime to take it to the levels you have, I don't know. But even if it stopped there, that's a huge jump. So yes, I do agree. Plant medicines are showing up probably right on time at the right location to crack that door open for some. Some of those people will walk through that doorway and continue. Some, at the very least, they've at least peeped in. When someone brings up stuff like you're talking about, you're not just some crazy guy. It's like, that's the thing. I bet you if all these people hadn't done DMT and ayahuasca and peyote rituals, all different things the West has been doing in the last 20, well, really more years, but heavily for the last 15 years, there would be much more people being like, the dude's nuts. But once you've taken that stuff and seen what you've seen, a guy like you doesn't seem so crazy anymore. So yeah, these things all work together, right? And we need people going deep, and we need people at least acknowledging that there are other ways to consciously exist, to interact with our spirit and with each other on this planet. So I agree with what you said. When you look at evolution, things tend to change relatively slowly, but in the eye of time, it isn't that slow. I mean, we view things from our lifetime. Say you're lucky enough to live to be 100 years. I want to see this whole world be enlightened and living like the days of Atlantis in my lifetime. And they might. And I don't want to ever give up hope. But
why do you want to see that? Why do you think that's good?
Well, good question. Well, for me, I have a really hard time knowing there are so many people suffering. That's what bothers me. Like, my life can be great and I can have the best day of my life and swimming in my pool with my kids, and me and the wife go out for date night, and I eat a beautiful meal and drink a great bottle of wine. But there's always a part of me that just whispers in my ear, like, good for you, dude. But so many people are suffering. And I believe that suffering can be easily eradicated with just human cooperation and our lust for material possessions and the things that you talked about in the beginning that never really satisfied you is so strong in humans still to this day, the majority of humans to this day, that corruption perpetuates itself. And so I guess that's a selfish thing to say, because I'm saying I want it for my own peace. But there's just a part of me that feels like I feel connected. I feel like I am part of everything. I mean, that might sound crazy to some people, but I've had experiences that lead me to believe that's true. Yeah, I'm looking at you through the eyes of Aaron, but I don't believe I'm 100% Aaron. I think I'm you. And so when I see the world suffering, I see myself. Like, there's parts of me that are being treated unfairly. And so I'd like to see that go away. That would be my main reason.
Let me offer you a different take on it.
Okay.
So it gets down, I think, to your fundamental belief about why all this exists. Why is there a physical earth? Why are there people? Why do we have emotions? why do some things feel good and some things feel bad? And one of the conclusions that I've come to over this journey of the different things that I've seen of experience is that Earth is a school, and souls come down and take human bodies to go to school, to learn.
Makes sense.
And one of the interesting things about the way humans are created is that when everything's good, they kind of just enjoy it. But when they suffer, then they start to look deeper and peer within. And so I was at an event in Topanga Canyon the other day with a bunch of people, and there was a similar conversation. This was a person who teaches like Tantra and other things, and they're like, I want to alleviate all the suffering on the planet. And I was like, really? How come? Well, because I want da-da-da. But without that suffering, if all you did was feel good and were happy and making love to your wife and playing with your children and having wine and a nice meal, would you ever go really deeply work on developing yourself? Most people don't. Most people look for answers because they're in pain. And so if you sort of abstract above it and go, well, why does pain exist? Well, maybe because otherwise people wouldn't go look. And so while I agree, we want to end suffering, I think at least for me, the way that I address that dynamic is I want to make the knowledge and tools available to people who are suffering so they can fix themselves.
Teach a man to fish. I mean, a couple of things you said there, I do agree with you. And I've had those same thoughts. I mean, one would be everything is fine as it is. I do believe in some weird way that's true. I say it lightly because there are people that are suffering acutely in such ways that you sound callous to say something like that.
It hurts bad.
But I don't know if that's true. There's part of me that it must be a system in place. The thing that made this whole universe obviously was very intelligent, and I don't think it would create mistakes. So I have to assume even the worst tragedies somehow fit into some longer story into maybe if I could look at it all from a 1,000,000-year perspective, I would click and I'd be like, oh, totally. Everything was fine the whole time. So it's like the acute now moments, it can seem, atrocious.
Yeah, when it's right there.
Right there happening.
There's no escape.
Right. But then, you have to ask yourself, little things like, well, if perhaps reincarnation is actually true, then we come back and we do this possibly thousands of times. That particular soul that's going through that particular horrific event is going through that horrific event to learn a specific thing, to drive them inward, to or maybe there's a payback of karma of some kind. So you can extrapolate these things to make that okay. And I guess more as you said that, I was like, I kind of agree with that too.
It's a slippery slope. I mean, I have been to the bottom of suffering in the depths of my 20s in the darkness. I know how much that pain feels. And when I see someone, I have deep empathy for what they are going through. And I also know that within them is the power to resolve their own suffering. Each person has the power to resolve their own suffering if they choose to look and seek and apply the effort and the dedication. Now, there's some types of karma where like you just did really something shitty in a past life and you just got to pay and then you just got to get through it. Like that's just how it is. It's called, there's a special kind of karma that is. But for most people, the suffering they experience in life usually oftentimes is self-imposed, but there is almost always a way out of that if they choose to seek that and apply themselves and go search for it.
Well put. I would agree with you. As you were speaking, it got me to thinking, with all the different paths you've been a part of, what are some common threads? Okay, so one big topic would be reincarnation. Do all the paths that you found to be truthful and real, and reincarnation seems to be a consistent, that's what's going on. We die, our soul goes to another plane, we choose to come back, as you said, to burn off karma or to learn or to be of service to a certain cause or da-da-da-da. That's what's happening, right?
Yep.
And I believe it, and you'll probably tell me this is true, even if you go into Christianity, that is the core essence of Christianity before it got manipulated. Am I right about that?
Yep.
So really they all share that in common. So that's what we're doing.
So the way to think of, in my experience, there is one of the low frequency bands of consciousness is that which is characterized by fundamentalism. And fundamentalists who believe in the literal word of whatever scripture it is that they follow generally don't believe in reincarnation because they're just so crystallized at that low level they're not capable of it. It's like expecting a kindergartner to understand theoretical physics. Like it's just that's not bad. That's just where they are. If you drive from San Diego to New York, you got to go through Los Angeles. Doesn't make San Diego bad or good. It's just where you start. And that's perfectly good. But the soul is like, it's like, if you think of yourself as the soul, then think of your body as the car. And in your life, you've probably had 5 or 10 different cars. And each time you buy a different one and you have a different experience in that car. And sometimes it's a red one or a silver one or a white one or a sports car or an off-roader or whatever. And your soul uses bodies like cars to go have experiences on its journey. And if you look at the esoteric teachings of every path that I've ever encountered, including Christianity, if you read the teachings of the Desert Fathers from the early days of Christianity, the letters that when they meditated and prayed in the caves in the desert and wrote to each other, they are very clearly talking about reincarnation. Every single religion. When you get to the true esoteric teachings and you have an experience of realms beyond the physical, it is self-evident that the soul exists beyond time and space and has multiple experiences in the physical realm to learn and grow and be of service. And that reincarnation is as vanilla as, Diet Coke. There's just nothing special about it.
Yeah. And I will add that if your goal is to control a population, removing reincarnation from the teaching is a good way too, right? Because if if you got that reincarnation thing floating around, it's harder to motivate people to do what you tell them to do. You tell them they got one life, this is it. They're listening. They're like, all right, what do I got to do?
Follow my rules or else.
Yeah, and this is it. You got one. But it also creates a crazy level of sadness when you believe in that model, because then when the baby dies or you just like, that was it. That one only got. But this way is, you can find peace with some of the tragedies of this existence much more quickly with that.
Well, understanding brings peace.
Right. Understanding the truth. So then this is getting a little weird, but the universe is so big, right? I mean, infinite possibly. We typically reincarnate on Earth because, and I would assume it has to do with almost like tribes. You kind of choose to go back to a tribal area that you're familiar with. Because I would assume there's life all over the universe and reincarnation happening everywhere and souls coming in and out of existence. God, how big it is, right? So is that why we reincarnate? Like if I could remember all of my past lives, most likely they were all earthly lives. I wasn't on some other planet million light years from here and then back to here. Or does that occur too?
I think there's different schools of thought. In my experience, as you go through the journey and you go to different parts of the continuum, your vista changes, right? If you're standing in San Diego on the beach and looking out at the ocean, you have one view of how the world, of what reality is. If you go up in a spaceship and you're up in the space station and you look down on Earth, you describe reality from a very different perspective, right? Because you're looking at it from a different place. And so as you do the meditation and as you open yourself, you're able to see, your perspective goes to higher and higher places, and your view and your perspective changes on what reality is comprised of. And if you get high enough, then you can see our universe. And within our universe, there's all these stars. And around all these stars are all these planets. And on all these planets and in all these stars within our universe are this not infinite, but this huge variety of different forms of life. And within those forms of life, there are paths for unfoldment relevant to those forms of life. And that's in our universe. And if you rise up above it even further, there are trillions of universes with billions of stars, with trillions of planets and life forms, and different paths that come and tunnel up through the different layers of reality to get home. So as souls are created, in my experience, they do sort of tend to form cohorts within a cycle of time or a particular part of reality. And then they tend to journey together as they go through that. But that after you go through that cycle of time in that journey, you may be off to different corners of a different galaxy or whatever.
Gosh, that's psychedelic. think about this size. It's such just the scope of it, right?
It makes you realize how silly all this stuff is that we get so worked up about.
Right. Right. So true. Man, that's great.
You got to laugh about it a little bit.
You do. No, it's funny too. On almost every deep psychoactive journey I've taken, one of the messages they always give me is to laugh more. They're like, you're being way too serious, man.
But you got to live here. I got a wife. I got an ex-wife. I got 2 kids. I got more bills to pay. I got a car. I'm getting older. I got to try to stay in shape. So, my wife thinks I'm cute, and I got to you got all this stuff. This is real. It's here. We live this life. Right. And we exist timelessly all out there as well at the same time.
When I was a little kid, I can always remember doing this. I used to lay in bed at night, not every night, and I would try to imagine nothing. Like I was just fascinated that there's anything. Like why is there something? And I guess it was type of meditation. I would slowly try to think of nothing. Like trying to imagine that nothing ever existed. No trillions of galaxies, no stars, no planets, no people. I would just see white, and it would terrify me. And I kept doing it. Like I almost like the terrifying feeling. And then I would, oh man, that's fucking scary. Like, and then that got me into and then, I guess maybe you do know the answer, but I don't know who has the answer to this, but why is there something? What started something? That is such a fucking weird thing, man. Where did something come from? Why not nothing?
That's the big question. That's a God question. I don't have the answer to that one. This exists.
We had to just work with what we got. Yeah, that's true.
I think, in my experience, there's some things that you just don't get the answer to. Well, you have a physical body.
Yeah.
You just don't. Maybe somebody else has got the answer, but I know that if you go to, the most immediate thing that people typically encounter in the inner worlds, when they shut their eyes, they go into the darkness, and they encounter the light, is the soul, which appears as a glowing ball of white light. And when that awakens within you, your eyes are shut, and all of a sudden, with your eyes shut, it's blinding, bright, white light. And that's because typically you have moved up and encountered the soul. But in this physical incarnation where there's 10 or so planes of reality, you have a soul on each plane of reality. So you technically have 10 souls. Mm-hmm. And you have a body on each plane of reality. And each of those bodies runs independently. But there's like a master soul on the top that sees and coordinates all of those. And so the journey is to reintegrate all of those into one in a conscious experience, so that you're conscious of all that going on.
Well, there's a lot of talk about ancient history changing on the planet right now. All the new discoveries that are being made, Atlantis and all these weird pyramids, and now they're redating them, and they're kind of I believe through a lot of things I've watched and read that there was advanced civilizations on planet Earth. I don't know the exact timeline, 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 years ago, that somehow either left or got obliterated by a comet, who knows? But, when they find these perfectly, straight cut lines in stone, in granite that we could barely do today with laser beams. There's just piles and piles and piles of evidence proving that some kind of advanced civilization existed on Earth. Do you think that those civilizations went through a similar cycle that we're going through? Like they went through, the point where they integrated into a higher level of consciousness and then went on off and wherever they go after that. And now we're another cycle of that. And we're just finding their leftovers laying around, buried under the oceans and under the dirt.
The Earth's billions of years old. I think that's
a good point.
Unlikely that we're the first folks who have been here to do this. How many and what form and how long ago? I don't know. I haven't really peered at that. I think that, at least for me, I don't think that big in that dimension. It's like a more immediate experience. Like, I'm here. Mm-hmm. I have a body. There's a reason why I'm here. What is it? And what am I going to do about it? And I think that probably is true, that there was other things, other races, that happened over the course of human history as the crust has recycled itself and the classroom got renewed for the next group of students that were coming through that needed a fresh perspective. I'm sure that probably happened. But to me, that falls into, I've always had a screen on knowledge that was sort of how I decided where I was going to place my attention. And that was like the big so what question. Like, if you knew that the Lemuria was true or Atlantis was true, how does that impact your experience of coming here and doing the pod and tatting folks and taking care of your kids? And like, how does that actually affect you? And for me, the so what is, how do I get to the top of the mountain in the time that I have and make the most of it? And so that's sort of where I filter and screen.
I agree with you. There is that, like, what does it matter? I mean, you're here now and you have these tools and these resources, and what am I going to do with them? But I do think that question would be paradigm shifting for the planet, though. I mean, you got a lot of people that their guiding star for existence is based on our current history books, and the denial of these things is,
Sure.
it would shake up paradigm, which I kind of get off. I get off on shakeups, and controversy, and I love it, But I just wanted to hear your take on that. People out there that are just starting the path, meaning they're curious. They want to know more about spirituality. They want to know more about their own soul, the different levels of consciousness. I mean, you've been doing this work for 20 plus years, hard. And any words of advice for those young seekers out there, or any traps to avoid that might save them time or anything like that?
What I've found is that each person at this moment in time with their own consciousness and their own body is the result of countless lives that have come before that are blended together in this kaleidoscope to create this mosaic of who you are now. And that the energy of those past lives and those patterns of your experiences exist in different proportions in how you have been put together and shown up today. And so the result of that most often is that there are some spiritual paths or technologies that resonate or are more harmonic for you than others. Like, I'm not really drawn to Judaism. I'm not really drawn to Islam. I'm sort of drawn to Christianity, but I'm drawn to the soul travel, some of these other things. And so the most effective way that I have found to get on the path in a way that doesn't just sort of deal with the level of the personality, but actually moves you forward and transforms and reshapes your consciousness is to sort of sample a little bit of everything. And what I have observed is that when you find the path that is right for you, you'll touch that page or hear that talk or meet that monk or that person or that teacher, and it'll click and you'll be like, it's an aha. It's like, okay, that's my thing. And then the mind immediately, because the mind doesn't want you to, the mind's job is to keep you separated from truth. The mind will go, nah, that shit ain't real. And so the trick is to recognize what the mind is doing, which is its job and its function and why it exists, and to develop the discipline and independence and courage to go deep and see where it takes you. And then do it until it no longer serves you. And you'll feel like, okay, I've come to the end on this one, and then see where to go next. But follow your intuition, and your soul tries to talk through you via intuition, and it comes as these little whispers. Listen to that and trust it, and go explore and see where you land, because invariably your soul will guide you to where you are supposed to be to help you return home.
See, man, it's shit like that. It's why I love you so much. That's a great answer. See, it's you say things like that, and anyone listening right now that might think a lot of this is a little crazy, I've spent 30 years sifting through bullshit artists as a tattooer. I mean, not everybody, but I mean, I've got a pretty good meter, and I've never seen a moment out of you that didn't feel completely honest and sincere. And I think that answer exemplifies that, because you could have easily said, oh yeah, I can tell you what we should do. Here's my website, and here's where you donate the money. And you know what I mean? Like, there's two people in the spiritual realms, I think, have always been too quick to tell you, oh yeah, it's this way. What should I do? Come to me. I'll tell you exactly what to do. Come to me. And well, you didn't say that at all. You said, no, don't come to me or any of the paths I've mentioned here.
Please don't come to me.
Actually, don't come to me. But also, I think you're right. you got to find out what resonates with you, and especially in a spiritual context, and for me, I think I'm still younger. I haven't spent as much time doing these things, but it's always been, at least for now, Buddhism. Yeah. Great advice. Perfectly. Nailed it.
It's interesting, if you look at it if you look at the paths from the inner view, they're like parallel lines going up. And you've got Islam here, and parallel to that is Christianity, and parallel to that is Judaism, and parallel to that is Zoroastrianism and Jainism and Hinduism and all the isms. And as you absorb into the parts of those, the revelation that often comes is that it's a similar wine, but it goes into the bottle that is culturally relevant to the group of people in the geography and time and place that are in need of it. And so that it could be underneath it all the same truth, but it's cloaked in a way that the people at that time and place and culture can connect with it so that they can follow the thread.
Right. No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, if you, in a more just straightforward way, if you take somebody who grew up in the Middle East and try to plop them into a Buddhist monastery, can Buddhism get you to the top of the rainbow? Yeah. So could Islam, and he's going to relate. Right. And so there's these different paths that are meant for these different cultures. And then there's the weird one where you could be born possibly a white Anglo-Saxon male, but your last 20 lives were spent as a man living in China. So for whatever reason, you just find you need to fly to China and get back to that system.
That's right.
That it doesn't necessarily mean where you were. Oh, you were born in the South, you've got to be a Baptist. You might be born in the South and you're not connecting with that type of Christian religion, and you find yourself drawn to the Middle East to become Islam. You see people do that too. And it's probably for the reason that you said earlier, which is reincarnation. And maybe many, many lives you spent working your path from a different perspective. Yeah, that makes total sense. But they all are parallel and they all end at the same location. They're just different ways to get there.
Well, different ladder. I mean, different ones go to different places. So they're not all paths are created equal. Some take you, some ladders have 10 rungs, some have 20, some have 50, some have 100. But they're all designed. It's like that game when we were kids called Chutes and Ladders, where you kind of, you go up the ladder and it gets you to this one place, and then you got to go and you go around and you get to another ladder and it goes up this way, and then you kind of go around, like Percival and in the story of Percival. Like the journey is not always super linear, but it's designed to allow you to go and then experience and then go and then experience and eventually over time through the journey, find your way to the top. But the kind of the irony of it is that like you have all these like Islam and Christianity that are sort of at odds with one another, or these other religions that are at odds with one another. All these people who are Islam in this life might be Christian in the next life, or Buddhist in the next life, or the man who is oppressive to women in his community might be a woman in the next life. And so it's kind of, once you can sort of get up above it, you see the sort of the ridiculousness of a lot of the things that we fight about in our daily lives.
It's a good system. If everyone truly believed in that system, we'd sure be a lot more careful about how we treated one another. When you start believing in karma like I do, and reincarnation like I do, I think about that stuff. Heck, are you vegetarian?
I'm not.
I worry about that. I'm not a vegetarian either. And I worried a little, this whole karma thing, like, well, I'm a part of a system that really creates a lot of unneeded pain and suffering for other forms of life.
But each of those forms of life is here to fulfill its purpose.
Yeah.
Sometimes its purpose is to provide sustenance, right? Like
Right.
I've done 10-day retreats at different places, like, and met, a lot of monks, and a lot of the monastic traditions have a vegetarian tenet that is essential to being part of the journey. But then you go to Mongolia and you sit with the Buddhists in Mongolia. And if you're a Buddhist monk in Mongolia and you grew up in Mongolia, there aren't any vegetables.
Right.
All you eat is meat.
Right.
And those guys are completing the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So if being a vegetarian is a prerequisite to whatever higher state of consciousness you attain to, and the guys over there are still doing it and eating meat, is that really true? So I've experimented with both. I think for some people, being a vegetarian totally works for them. For some people, it doesn't. For me, it doesn't. But I think it's a personal decision. I don't think there's an absolute rule that says you must do this.
I kind of agree with you on that. And I've thought the same thing. How is it we have seemingly extremely enlightened people who eat, like you said, Buddhist monks in Mongolia, and they're not vegetarian? But I just thought I'd ask your opinion of that. Like if you would have said, nope, you're eating meat, you're developing karma, you just have to pay back later. Oh, shit.
Well, it's how you eat it, right? Being conscious about
Right.
having gratitude for the sacrifice of the sustenance. But I find it works a little bit differently. So there are all these rules that people make about, oh, well, you should fast and you should be vegetarian and you should do cleanses and you should do no caffeine or no alcohol or whatever. But Yogananda used to tell his students, do whatever you want, but do the kriyas and do the work. Mm-hmm. And what he meant by that is as you cultivate yourself internally and as you remove the density and darkness, the things that you are attracted to consuming will change as you change. And so as you move higher through the spheres up the ladder, alcohol or caffeine or whatever it is just won't feel good anymore. Mm-hmm. And you naturally
falls away.
It just falls away. You don't have to try to avoid it. It becomes incompatible and you choose to avoid it because you have changed. Mm-hmm. And I think that is, if you do the inner work, the outer world becomes a reflection of your inner journey, and those things may stay or they may go and they may come back later down the road. But mm-hmm. it's a reflection of your inner process versus having to adhere to some strict rule that somebody on a pulpit or on a mat or on a cushion or in a book said.
Mm-hmm. That makes perfect sense. Your desires and cravings are a result of what's happening inside, not you change your desires and cravings to change what's happening on the inside, right? It makes perfect sense. Well, buddy, we could go. I could. I'm kind of bummed that I haven't made more time to hang out with you, dude. I think I'm gonna.
I think it's perfect.
Like I'm gonna meditate tonight. It's been a while. Like I'm feeling like a exchange happening between us, and I'm just glad you're here. Stoked we had this time together.
Me too.
I'm going to switch it up a little bit because we can't go all day, unfortunately. I mean, I guess we could, but we both have things we got to do later. So tattoos, that's where our journey began. Let's talk about that for a second. I've done 2 full sleeves on you. I think we started the first one 15, you said 15 years ago?
I think I was 38, yeah.
So 15 years ago. And we've been, I don't know the exact schedule, but over the last 15 years, we did a little here, a little there, a little that side, little that side. And now you ended up with these two full sleeves by me, which is our connection and bond. Thank God for tattooing, because I don't know if we'd even have met each other if it wasn't for that
probably not.
That art form. But we've had a lot of fun tattooing. And of course, every time we hang out and tattoo, basically we do this. Except it's 4 or 5 hours, you know. And I just, those memories of us doing this, I'll cherish them forever. But they were also really transformative for me, you know, guiding me in these different directions I've taken myself spiritually was from those hours we spent together. But on that note, we are going to do another tattoo today because it's kind of the show, Chats and Tats. And we don't always do a tattoo. And I asked you, hey, you want to do a little something on the show? And you said, I do. And I believe we're going to do a golden dolphin.
We are. That's right.
Just tell us a little bit about why you're going to get a golden dolphin.
Yeah. So, I decided to do the sleeves when I was 38. I'm 51 now, so that's, almost 15 years. And I wanted initially to do the full sleeves with the back, which we talked about. Mm-hmm. And the right side for me is the feminine. So you've got the goddess, the mother, the baby. You've got the golden fishes from Buddhism. You've got the Russian Orthodox cross from my time in Siberia. And then the left side for me was the masculine. So you got Milarepa, the great Tibetan sage, sitting on the deer skin with the monastery in the Himalayas and the mountains. And then across is the dragon, which is him fighting, is symbolic of him taming the mind. And as I've arrived at this point in my journey, and I now have a wife, an ex-wife, a daughter, and a son, I realized that unconsciously what we were creating was also the constellation of my family. And so you have my daughter here, mm-hmm. Sky, who is the little baby. You have my my ex-wife, the original mother. You have me, the urban monk, sitting on the mat. My son's name is Dragon. And so you've got the dragon up on the chest. And so my new wife, Alexandra, my brother gave me the nickname the Golden Mojo when I was in my early 20s. He thought it was funny and it kind of just stuck. And so we call my son the Golden Dragon, and we call Sky the Golden Leopard. And so my wife she's sort of long and smooth and golden and lean. We call her the Golden Dolphin. And so I really wanted to do something to honor our relationship. And she's had a huge, huge impact on my life, super healing on multiple levels. And it's just created a beautiful container for us to go and explore and enjoy the world. And so to honor her, I wanted to do a golden dolphin, and it is reflective of who she is.
I love that. I love that story. And it is funny that our tattoos were half premonition.
Right? The guru brings the future onto the skin.
I love the guru. But I will say that has happened a lot. I can't tell you how many times I'll meet with people for a consultation. I try to be very present with people when I'm with them. I try to shut down my thinking and just listen, and they'll, it's pretty superficial most of the time. They want this, they want that. And I just take some notes, and then I usually like a couple weeks or 3 weeks where I call it meditation. I always feel like my brain is working on things without me doing it. I talk to it that way. I'm always like, hey, subconscious, I've got a sleeve to draw in 3 weeks. I need it to be meaningful and badass. And I just go back to, making dinner with my wife. And then it comes time to draw things, and then little inspirations just pop out. Like, I don't know, man, I think this would look cool and that would look cool. And then I bring it to the person and they're like, how did you know my grandfather? It'd be some imagery I've drawn and it happens so many times. And I don't like saying it because I feel like I'm trying to tell people that I'm like got this magic power. And I don't think I do. I think I'm a regular guy that somehow when you tune into another person, And it's happened so many times that it doesn't surprise me anymore when people tell me things like that.
It is a power. It's a city. It's a special power.
Well, I guess I got
it's like Jordan being good at basketball. It's like,
yeah, well, thank you for that compliment. I love the story of how we kind of pre-tattooed your family and life in some way as it was happening before some of it already happened. And today kind of finishes that circle, which is super dope.
Sounds great.
Oh. Welcome back, everybody. The golden dolphin has arrived and landed on your shoulder blade. So that was cool. That was cool. I mean, especially hearing the story earlier about how the tattoos we previously done represent all the significant people in your family. And full circle, as always with us, we plopped that last one on you today. And it was funny when I was tattooing you there, because it's been a few years and you've gotten a lot of like nipples and your chest and under boob, and those are gnarly areas. And you sat through all those many long sessions, 5-6 hour sessions we've done together, many. And now it's been 5 years. And you even said like, whoa, I forgot how much this shit
That's
sucks.
a little prickly.
Yeah. It is. I went through the same thing recently because you asked me, because you're like, when's the last time you got tattooed? And I'm like, actually recently. And I got the first one in a few years, 3 years maybe, on my foot, kind of the foot ankle zone. And it was the same for me, man. I was kind of cold sweat broke out. I was like, fuck,
I'm getting old.
Yeah. Like I could be getting a massage right now. What am I doing here? Yeah. People say they hurt more when you get older. I don't believe that to be true because you know what it is? It's enthusiasm. Enthusiasm can get you through a lot. And when you're getting your first tattoos, you're so enthusiastic. That enthusiasm you brush off that pain. And you get older and you get a lot of tattoos and they just don't carry the same amount of fire that those first ones do. That lack of enthusiasm, you get you're willing to be a little more with that pain and be like, fuck this. This is what I've noticed.
Yeah. And, there's more drugs involved when you get older. That half bottle of Advil certainly helps it go down a little easier. So doing it cold turkey after 5 or 6 years out of the chair, it's a little prickly.
Yeah.
But, it's for a good cause. And
yeah. And you didn't tap out. You looked strong. You held it together.
Yeah. The numbness set in.
Yeah. Well, that was cool, buddy. I'm glad we got to do this. And I got to do one more tattoo on you. Maybe it won't be the last, but if it is, I think it was an appropriate last tattoo. We'll see.
Amen. Before
Before we close out, I mean, it's such a cool story, what you've done with your life. So unique and so rare, at least in my circles. I don't know anyone has done the amount of work you've done, especially in regards to meditation and all the different things you've achieved. And it's cool to see it all kind of coming full circle into this moment where it's just been your development. A lot of this has been your development. And now it seems like you have some plans to outwardly focus and bring this stuff to others. Tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've had in all of my explorations of these different paths and these different traditions and the practices and how they've done things over the years, you hear a lot about these monks that would go and sit in the caves and meditate. Mm-hmm. And at some level, I think that was about just the solitude and the quiet and being away from distraction. But at another level, I'm finding it's also about the darkness, and that in the darkness, like when you shut your eyes, there's darkness, but in the physical darkness, it has a transformative effect. And particularly like in the Bön tradition and in the Buddhist tradition, they would sometimes go for 7 or 8 weeks in complete darkness with a set of practices that you do every week that are designed to, in a predictable way, unfold your awareness to different levels. And so they build these special houses, these special huts to do it in, that has circulation and that has these special doors to pass food through so light doesn't come in. And then every morning the master teacher would come and check in on you and hear about your experience. And each week they would give you a new exercise to do for your meditation for that week. And you're in complete darkness. So there's no light. And you would do your practice, your body would adapt this sort of rhythm without seeing the light. But what happens is, in the absence of the stimuli from your visual senses, your other senses become much more sensitive, and your pineal gland starts to produce more DMT because you're not receiving visual information. Mm-hmm. And that naturally produced DMT ends up opening those channels to the higher gateways. And so I've been fascinated with this for a long time. I wanted to go do it. I found the place that does it in the US, and they are sold out until December of 2024. Mm. And so I decided I'm just going to do it myself. So I've got 10 acres in upstate New York, right on Cayuga Lake, just outside of Cornell University. And I'm going to build a dark meditation retreat center where, if you're in New York or you're in Boston, or even if you're in California, you can go and you can come, and they're built into the hillside, kind of like hobbit holes. And you go in and it's completely dark, and you can meditate for 3, 5, 7, 10 days, 3 weeks, 10 weeks, however long you want to do it. And so we're going through the permitting process right now. We'll hopefully break ground and get out of construction and launch in the summer of 24. And then the idea is to create a place where seekers can go and have these in a supported way, have these transformative, focused, intense meditation experiences. And then we'll do one in California. And then the idea is to take all of this experience and knowledge over the last couple of decades of doing this and build a network of these meditation sanctuaries around the globe where people can go and continue their practice.
Wow. I didn't understand the dark aspect. And that is going to be the defining difference between the centers you're building and other places. Each one, that it's very much focused on giving the people the ability to have that dark experience.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, it does make sense. I mean, it makes a whole lot of sense, just on a very surface level, right? If you think about how much of our consciousness is occupied by what we see, I mean, I would guess probably 90%. I mean, you open your eyes and there's just airplanes and cars and people. I mean, you're only left with a little bit behind there that it can light up and become active. That does make sense. I didn't know that. Why they would go out into caves, why so many gurus, you'd find them in caves, right?
That's right.
And that's interesting that it increases the Yeah, because the pineal gland, I've done a bit of research on that, does produce dimethyltryptamine. And if you weren't looking and using your visual cortex, it would uptake that production. That's cool. It also sounds a little scary. I bet you for a lot of people that sounds a little scary.
Yeah, I think it's you.
It's also, you're also separated from it. It's not just sight, you're alone.
You're alone.
It's those things happening.
You have to face yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why. If that's giving you guys the EBGBs like me, you probably need to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's intense work.
Well, yeah, I have my assistant, Brittany, works with me. Very metaphysical, very spiritual woman, very cool person. I'm very blessed to have her a part of the show. She, gosh, I wish I knew the name, went to a very intense meditation facility, East County. You might know this place. It's, you meditate 10 hours a day. And I don't think you speak. There's no speaking. Yeah, that's right. Obviously no phones, and you don't talk. Every morning starts off with a lecture from the guide, and then 10 hours a day. I mean, they walk around and keep your back. I guess it's very painful the first 3 days because your body has to. Yeah. And she just got back from that and said she's done a lot of things, including a ton of ayahuasca and other different metaphysical experiments and meditations. And she's like, that was the most powerful thing she's ever done, bar none. By far, period. And I've really had the ability to talk to deeper about it. I haven't seen her. She went on another trip. But it reminds me of what you're talking about, except also light being removed and being alone. She was at least in a room with other people around.
Yeah, I think Thich Nhat Hanh has a center that's in East County, and you can go and do Vipassana there for 7 to 10 days. And you literally, the Vipassana is the practice of sitting and observing the thoughts. And so as you observe the thoughts, eventually the mind is like a computer that's running a complex program, and you cycle through the CPUs, and eventually you end the program, and the computer rests because it's completed its computations, and the mind will eventually be rest because it's completed its processing. And then that allows you to pull in the other side. And
for the normal person, it doesn't do a lot of this practice. How many days does it take typically for that computer to kind of stop or slow down to a significant measure?
I think for most folks, it's probably around three or 4 days, like in the absence of that stimuli. How disciplined you are with not checking your cell phone or, sneaking a conversation and really just being present with where you are. Some people will get it on an airplane. If they just don't talk on the plane, the mind will calm and they'll drop in. And the ethers are much thinner up there in the air at 30,000 feet, so you can connect much more easily. But down on the ground here, most people, it seems to be 3 or 4 days.
It's interesting. So the actual atmosphere plays an effect on this. Is that why a lot of monks and stuff go to high altitudes possibly?
It's the atmosphere, and it's also because where there's lots of people, it creates the mental field there's a lot of static. Like there's a lot of like all the radio stations in a big city, right? But there's lots of people. And even if you go, the difference between San Diego and Los Angeles, once you cross Newport, you can feel Los Angeles's field because it's all these people and all this stuff going on. In San Diego, it's just much more cleaner and a much easier frequency because there's less chaos and there's less stuff going on.
That makes sense. Wow, you got me thinking about a lot of new stuff today. This is cool. This is fun. Well, awesome stuff, dude. Thank you so much. Maybe tell people, you want to tell people where to find you, or is there some websites they should be paying attention to or anything like that?
Yeah, you can, we'll put the links, post the links for folks, but the Instagram is at the Finding Silence Project.
Okay.
And the website for the dark retreats is Acraya.global, ACRAYA.global. Sign up there.
Very cool. Well, I wish you the best on this new adventure. I have a suspicion I'm going to be in a dark room soon. Damn it.
Save the King Suite for you.
I keep saying, hey, universe, if you want me to do something, just send me open the doors, and then here you are. Fuck. I was hoping it was going to be somebody that was going to invite me for, I don't know, 3 weeks in Cabo or something. But nope, you come. I have to go sit in a room by myself for 10 days. Thanks. I'm sure it will be powerful. And I think I have to do that at least once. At least I can say, I did it, Well, very cool. Wish you the best of luck on all of it. I know I'll be right there paying attention the whole time. I know our paths will cross again soon. I look forward to that. Thank you for everything you've shared with us today. And until next time, my friend.
It was a great conversation. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, it was. All right, my man. Boom. All right. That's it for today, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. Every Wednesday, new episodes dropping. Keep those comments coming. Keep those subscriptions coming. I want to be doing this in a year from now. I need your support. I appreciate your support. Thank you very much. So with that being said, we'll see you on the next one. Peace out.